Welcome to the Com Analytics channel. This is Borys Tizenhausen. The new package of sanctions has had the effect on the Kremlin like silver on vampires. Shoigu threatens Europe with a coffin, and Medvedev demands to strike NATO first. In North Korea, the newest water park was suddenly closed after Lavrov's visit. How and why did the project of an American village with traditional values in the Moscow region fail? And Orban is threatening to leave the European Union? And Slovakia has suddenly approved the 18th package of sanctions. What is included in this package and why is it being called the toughest one yet? And also about how Japan is planning to attack Russia. All this and more in today's episode. If this is your first time on this channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Let's get into it. So, the announced sanctions affected Russian officials like silver affects vampires. That's why astrologers have declared a week of dire threats against NATO and the West. It feels like some of them are so twisted by this that aliens are about to burst out of them. Shoigu promised to crush Europe in the event of a war with Russia. The European countries that are increasing their defense budgets because of the Russian threat will inevitably be defeated if they go to war with Russia, said Secretary of the Russian Security Council Sergei Shoigu, quoting, "I would like to recall the words of the great Russian commander Suvorov. A Russian is distinguished by faith, loyalty, and reason." In short, Shoigu said that if all of Europe moves against Russia, it will find its own Thermopylae, its own Leonidas, and its own grave there. So that's how he recalled Suvorov's words. Well, for now, Europe isn't planning to move anywhere. It's Russia that's attacking its neighbors. So I don't know about Leonidas and Thermopylae, but Putin will definitely find his own grave in Ukraine. And by the way, about the claim that a Russian is distinguished by faith, loyalty, and reason. The word reason is unnecessary here. Faith and loyalty maybe, but the real question is loyalty to whom or to what? Because 99.9% of them are fighting solely for money? Take away the payments and there will be no one left at the front. So in the modern context, Suvorov's phrase, applied to this war and to Russians, would sound something like this. A Russian is distinguished by faith and loyalty to money. That's all for now. At the same time, Shoigu emphasized that Moscow is open to an equal dialogue with European capitals and is ready to discuss the architecture of Eurasian security. But so far, the authorities of EU countries are ignoring the interests of their own citizens and worsening their well-being under the pretext of a Russian threat, Shoigu lamented. Such touching concern for the well-being of Europeans from Putin lately. Shoigu, Lavrov, they seem to care more about European citizens than about their own. I think you've noticed that. And regarding the security architecture and Russia's openness to discussion, well, no one is planning to discuss the architecture of European security with you anymore. The most sensible step is to mine the border with Russia and strengthen defense capabilities, which, by the way, Europe is actively doing right now. And Shoigu probably forgot to mention what actually caused all this, such a sharp militarization, record spending on security by European countries, and the fact that Russia is now seen as an aggressive, unruly neighbor. So what is the reason for all this? There is only one reason. It's that old man with puffed up cheeks who got into a war and doesn't know how to get out of it. And that's not all. According to Shoigu, the current militarization of Europe could lead to more and more voices being heard from those who seek mutually beneficial cooperation with Russia and peaceful coexistence with them. Isn't it odd that before the war, there was no need to strive for this at all? I mean, everyone traded with Russia and got along just fine. Putin used to travel all over the world and, by the way, wasn't afraid of being arrested. As always, they're lying and distorting the cause and effect relationship. Kabayev, that old man Kabayev, has condemned Russia and Russians to pariah status for many, many, many years. And as for the patriotism of Great Russia, the whole "we will defeat everyone" thing, as Shoigu says. Here's another piece of news that came out almost simultaneously with Shoigu's statement. A general from Shoigu's team, named Shesterov, was sentenced to 6 years in a penal colony for embezzlement at the Patriot Park. That's the very park where Shoigu built the main military church, which was painted in green camouflage in khaki. And I've said more than once that they were planning to have frescoes of both Putin and Stalin there. So just imagine for a second what on earth is going on there. You know, it's like the dream of someone with a fever over 40 degrees. That's basically Russia. There's the Patriot Park, khaki colors, Stalin, a general stealing, and this guy talking about patriotism. That's Russia in a nutshell. By the way, friends, let me remind you, we have a very important fundraiser going on right now. We're making good progress and have already reserved 3 ATVs for our soldiers. So let's finish this fundraiser. The legendary 152nd Separate Jaeger Brigade is fighting in the Pokrovska direction. The situation is very difficult. They need 3 ATVs. They recorded a direct message to you, the viewers of this channel, and reached out to us. I think we can help. Together we are a great force. Here's their message. I'll show it to you again.
Wishing you good health. We, the servicemen of the 152nd Separate Jaeger Brigade, are carrying out our duties in the Pokrovska direction. We appeal to Borys Tizenhausen and the viewers of his channel to help us purchase 3 ATVs to accomplish essential combat missions. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes.
True titans, fierce warriors, fearless. Let's help them because this equipment is extremely necessary for them right now. The link to donate is in the description below this video and also in the first comment. And also, if you're watching me not on my channel, there's a QR code you can use to go directly to the donation page. And in the description, you'll also find the details for those who want to help from abroad. A huge thank you to everyone. I see all of you, and I want to personally say a huge thank you for helping Ukraine and our warriors. 2 news items in a row. This one is a very telling piece of news. I liked it. In the Moscow region, a project for a village intended for American settlers who came there in search of traditional values, in other words, fleeing from the non-traditional values of the decaying West, has failed. This project for a village for US citizens who decided to move to Russia stopped developing due to lack of demand, and the authorities stopped supporting it. The person who started building this settlement, the initiator to be precise, was a 43-year-old blogger from the US, Tim Kirby. He has been living in Russia since 2006, and in 2018 he obtained Russian citizenship. They allocated 30 hectares, meaning they estimated that several thousand people would soon be fleeing from the US. However, since then, only 2 houses have appeared on the plot for 2 emigrant families. That's all there is to it. So now this blogger is trying to raise money through crowdfunding, but nothing much is coming of it. And he writes that no one is supporting the project. That's the problem. I reached out to governors. Everyone likes the idea. They'd like to see it realized, but as for the money, well, you'll have to find it yourself. Of course, Medvedev once gave you the perfect formula. There's no money, but hang in there. And everyone was supposed to rush from the US to the Moscow region to Istra, and there a gigantic settlement was supposed to grow. Thousands of American families. Yeah, right. And in the US, they say African Americans ate all the pigeons. We remember this from the Soviet Union days. But buying washed-up, talentless actors like Steven Seagal that they can do. But to seriously claim that now thousands of Americans and Europeans will rush to Russia, that's just too much, in my opinion. And now the most interesting part. One of the families connected to this village who moved to Russia from the state of Texas with their 3 young children is the Huffman family, Derek and Diana. They moved to a settlement near Istra to that village. So, Derek signed a contract with the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation to speed up the process of obtaining Russian citizenship and, to secure schooling for his children, since American kids weren't being accepted. Who knows, maybe they're infected with the wrong values over there. But the adaptation has been difficult. Learning Russian has been a real challenge. The children didn't go to school and the parents couldn't find work. And where did they send this Derek? To the war. So yesterday I came across a video where this far-sighted lady, Diana, with her 3 children, explains how at first her husband was promised he would become a correspondent at the front somewhere nearby. Then they wanted to send him to a repair battalion, but in the end, they decided he would just be cannon fodder. And so she complained. This is a very recent video. She complained that he can't really learn anything in this training unit before being sent off because the classes for foreigners are conducted in Russian. As they say, she miscalculated somewhere, but it's not clear where, right? By the way, it's a perfect place for those who live in the decaying West but love Putin and the Russian world. Why don't you want to move to Istra? They're ready to build an entire settlement for you there. Now, the second piece of news on the same topic, this one is the opposite, with a negative sign. Russians have sharply increased their demand for US visas, well, in general by 20% compared to the same period. So, on the contrary, people want to flee Russia, not move there. And there's one more piece of news that fits right in here as well. News. Where else could Russians go? Recently, Kim Jong-un opened a VIP resort with a water park. Maybe you've seen this news. The highlight of this resort. Well, it's a highlight for Kim Jong-un at least. So it's located not far from the testing range where missile launches take place, where Kim Jong-un conducts his tests. So you can sip a cocktail, maybe something like a dictator's kiss, and watch a ballistic missile fly off into the distance. So Lavrov visited this VIP water park, this super resort with hotels, and promised to fill it with Russian tourists. But after Lavrov's visit to this resort, it was urgently closed. So what happened? The National Tourism Administration announced that the reception of foreign guests at the Wonsan resort has been temporarily suspended. It took 6 years to build. It's really amazing, isn't it? To close the resort right after Lavrov visited it, maybe for some extra sanitization, I don't even know. Or perhaps, to significantly enhance and bolster the security measures, adding more vigilant guards and robust watchtowers to the North Korean resort. A grand welcome, dear Russians, awaits you. North Korean water parks, a tour of Afghanistan's Golden Ring. What else is there? Iran's underground escape rooms, starch parties at Kolya's dad's place in Belarus. These will guarantee you new sensations and unforgettable experiences. We've really hit rock bottom, as they say. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel because there was one boy who didn't subscribe and now he keeps repeating the same phrase. But why did you bomb Donbass for 8 years? And now we've had an event that happens almost every week. In fact, I think it happens every week. The alcoholic has escaped from the detention center and is once again threatening the whole world. Medvedev has proposed launching preemptive strikes against NATO countries. How do you like that? Russia doesn't need to wait for attacks from NATO. It should strike first, declared Deputy Chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, Dmitry Medvedev. He noted that the West still has not only treachery running through its veins, but also a warped sense of its own superiority. So it's the West that has this, huh? Well, okay. And further, we need to act accordingly, respond in full measure, and if necessary, deliver preemptive strikes, said Medvedev. Wow, that's something. Actually, we hear this all the time now, like Medvedev grabbing a second bottle over Finland. As for a preemptive strike, Medvedev can only deliver one to his own liver, which frankly he does on a regular basis. And according to Medvedev, for the Western elites, an independent and strong Russia has always been a historical anomaly. What comes next is a phrase that every single time makes you profoundly think, no, this absolutely must be the ultimate limit of this profound and utterly disheartening degradation. No, look, it's not the limit. According to Medvedev, by starting the war with the goal of demilitarizing and denazifying Ukraine, Russia gave Kyiv a chance, attention, to stop being a pawn in someone else's bloody geopolitical games. So, by starting a war against us, they decided to save us so that we wouldn't be a pawn somewhere out there. Do you see the logic? No? Well, of course not, because there isn't any. And really, what difference does it make to you over there in the swamps who wants to be whose pawn or, queen? For example, we don't want Belarus to be a pawn in Russia's hands. We don't want that. So should we cross the border, destroy Belarus, wipe out Lukashenko, and demolish everything around? I recently showed a video where an old lady, sitting under a little blue umbrella, was saying that it wouldn't be so bad if Putin finally dropped a bomb and killed everyone in the West, because all her grandsons have come back from the war crippled, and her nephew is missing. Utter stupidity and this kind of fanatical mindset, completely saturated with propaganda, just cemented in place, there's simply no fixing it. And now, another unpleasant development has happened for Russians. For the European, and accordingly, it's good news for the normal civilized world, the European Union has adopted its 18th package. And Slovakia has approved it. So Fico was putting spokes in the wheels there, but he approved it. And here, Fico's reasoning is interesting. And, as a media source reports, Prime Minister Fico explained that he made this decision after negotiations with the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, during which he secured certain guarantees, but not the ones he fully wanted. And here's the quote: "At this stage, continuing to block the 18th package of sanctions is already counterproductive. All possible options have been exhausted, and maintaining our blocking position could harm our own interests," said Fico. This also happened after a conversation with Merz, who, let me remind you, explained to him, that is to Fico, how things really stand in Odessa. And after that, the final word from Ursula von der Leyen and Fico, all right, all right, all right. What? Why didn't you say so right away? Oh, so I'm the one who's going to have problems? That's why it happened this way? And so, what exactly was included in this sanctions package? First of all, it includes a reduction of the price cap on Russian oil. It used to be $60 per barrel, now it will be floating between 45 and 50 and will be reviewed every 3 months. This is a serious blow, a serious one. But plus, 105 tankers from the shadow fleet of the Russian Federation have come under sanctions. This is very good news, but as long as there isn't a tough crackdown on the shadow fleet, unfortunately Russia still has the opportunity to circumvent these sanctions, and it is possible to fight the shadow fleet, and it's possible to track down all these tankers that are part of it. It's not a difficult task. I recently did a big report on this topic, on the shadow fleet and sanction evasion. I hope my findings will be useful, and apparently they already have been. Well, the companies and routes are known, and so are the transshipment points off the coasts of Turkey, Morocco, and Greece. Where and how the mixing happens is also known, turning Russian oil into Iranian, Iraqi, or even Kazakhstani oil, by the way. The intermediary companies in Dubai and Hong Kong, as well as in other jurisdictions, are also known. The most common flags under which these ships sail, Tanzania, Panama, Liberia, Togo, Cameroon, are all well known as well. There is even an algorithm for identifying these vessels that are part of the shadow fleet. There are a whole range of parameters, from behavioral factors to basic ones, such as turning off the transponder or frequently being in a potential transshipment zone. In general, as they say, where there's a will, there's a way. There's another important point in this package. The new sanctions are aimed at a number of Chinese banks that are assisting Moscow, and they also extend to Rosneft's Indian refineries. This is the main foreign subsidiary of this largest Russian extraction company. It's important to show that getting involved with Russia, engaging in joint projects, or allowing them to build refineries on your territory will end up costing you more. And yesterday, by the way, India stated that it would have no problem replacing Russian oil if American sanctions are imposed against it. That's why India's Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas said that it's absolutely not a problem. By the way, they actually have such a position. The Russians didn't expect that, did they? How quickly can our Indian brothers reorient themselves? They can. Also included in this package is the disconnection of 22 Russian banks from the SWIFT system and a ban on both direct and indirect use of the Nord Stream gas pipeline. So, in light of the particular activity of some overseas officials who suddenly decided that it's possible to do business with the Russians, this is a very correct decision. In addition to Fico, Orban decided to go in a different direction and allowed for the possibility of Hungary leaving the European Union because of the war in Ukraine and the gender agenda of that very European Union. Quote, Hungary may leave the European Union in the foreseeable future, since the Union has turned from an economic one into a political one, said Orban. I can promise Hungarian voters one thing. If I see that this membership in the European Union is no longer worth it, I will speak out. Go ahead, let's see. Let me remind you that Hungary joined the European Union in 2004, and at that time, according to Orban, it was nothing like it is now. In its current form, the EU has no chance for shared prosperity because it is simply disappearing, evaporating, decaying. It's finished. The European Union does have its own problems. That's true. And the issue of migrants, or more precisely, the completely ineffective policy in this area, is also a fact. But the idea that everything is the fault of damned Brussels, this is what Orban is now trying to push in his pro-Russian rhetoric, and the fact that Russian energy resources are being taken away from him, he is also trying to blame Brussels for that. It's not about the fact that it was Putin who started this war, and, pardon my French, Orban would still be guzzling that oil 3 times over if Putin hadn't started the war. So damn Brussels is not to blame for everything. The more corrupt they've become, the more they need an external enemy. Actually, it's a great idea, I mean Hungary leaving the European Union, but I think first and foremost you need to ask the Hungarian people themselves. The fact that Orban decided his shady schemes have collapsed is one thing, although I think Orban will be the first to be carried out of the European Union, because if you sum up the results of Orban's so-called great 15-year rule, it's all pretty dismal. Hungary ranks the lowest in terms of prosperity growth within the European Union, and that's despite having access to cheap Russian energy resources, and Orban claims that things have shifted from economic to political. Orban has 18 billion in funds that the European Union is supposed to give him, but they're frozen because he refuses to implement reforms. And let me remind you that Hungary pays 1 billion into the EU budget, but takes out 2.5 billion. Of course, this is no longer about economics, but about politics. By the way, now Russians are already imagining that Japan is about to attack them. Well, everyone is supposedly planning to attack them. It's astonishing. They do street interviews and everyone says, everyone wants to attack us, everyone wants to attack poor Russia, so we have to attack not NATO, not the US or whoever else, the Anglo-Saxons, Great Britain. We have to attack Ukraine. We have to attack Georgia. Where's the logic in that? So go ahead and attack NATO, give it a try. Medvedev, come on, try launching a preemptive strike against NATO. How many seconds would Medvedev survive after that before he gets blown to pieces? Or just gets torn apart into atoms of ethanol? So how long would that be? So Russians are imagining that Japan is attacking them. They imagine this every year whenever military exercises take place. But look at this statement. The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has sent a strong protest to the Japanese embassy. The reason is the participation of Japanese forces in US Air Force exercises, which will take place from July 9th to August 4th, closer to Russia's borders, on Okinawa and near Hokkaido. Well, just look at that. Quote, despite the stated purpose of the maneuvers being to increase the capabilities, deterrence, and response of Washington and Tokyo, there were direct hints that the need for these exercises was caused by the strengthening of Russia's defense capabilities. Russia considers such irresponsible activity, which has all the hallmarks of preparation for armed conflict, to be unacceptable. So everything that Putin has set in motion now, arming everyone around, because they think this savage might attack us tomorrow. Everyone is arming themselves. They're mining the border with Russia, cutting off ties, including economic ones. Well, not everyone, of course, but civilized normal countries are. So this is all what Putin started. And now Russians are saying, why are you arming yourselves? What do you want to attack us? Honestly, it's like every other person there has lost their mind. Honestly, it would be nice if someone attacked Russia from all sides. It would make things easier for us in Ukraine, but it feels like there won't even be a need to attack them. As I already mentioned with a historical example, when the Soviet Union attacked Finland during the Winter War, Hitler watched closely as the supposedly great second or even first army in the world just broke its teeth against Finland. And yes, he saw how not so great that army actually was, and he drew his own conclusions. Well, if that's the case, then you'll end up getting hit as well. And now, in exactly the same way, only much, much smarter and much more thoroughly, China is analyzing the situation. Believe me, without a single shot, China will carve off half of Russia, and no one will even make a sound. Then Putin's granddaughter, who, by the way, is already learning Chinese, will come out and in perfect Chinese say, "Welcome, new master. You've already reviewed the May 9th parade. You have experience, so go ahead and rule. Here's bread and salt for you." That's exactly how it's going to be. And as for you, my friends, take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Subscribe to this channel. I kindly ask you to support the fundraiser for our legendary warriors. They really need it right now. Wishing us all a peaceful day, and of course, glory to Ukraine.